Yeah, people, welcome to my channel. In today's project, we want to build a sign-in interface for the social media platform x.com, formerly known as Twitter. So we have this over here. This is what we're building in this video. And you can see we have these buttons over here with some cool hover effect on them. When we take the cursor over them, you can see that the background color changes for all of them and it works for it all. And we are building this. This is actually the continuation of what we've already started, building the whole login and sign-in interface. But if you haven't watched the previous one, it doesn't matter. This is going to be a standalone video on its own, so you don't have to watch the previous one in order to follow up with this one, because we are going to start as a new video on its own. So without further much ado, let's get started. So now, after we finish building this with all the mobile responsiveness, all the hover effect and everything is working, what we want to do next is to build the sign-in page, so that when the user clicks on this sign-in button, it takes them to that page where they can sign in, like we have here, with this cool hover effect and everything, just like we built in the previous section. It has this hover effect and everything works just very nice. So our focus is to build this page over here, and this how it looks, ignoring what's on the background. The background, that's previously what we built, and this is what we want to build in this video. The focus for this section right now is to build this thing over here. So let's get to the HTML and start building. So for starters, we can just remove everything over here. We'll just assume nothing is here. You can comment this over here to the close of this container div over here. So now we can just make our space here for our project, and we can run this, and you see that we have currently nothing on the page. So we are starting everything just afresh. So now what we want to do is to create a div and give it a class registration page. So we can give the CSS styling for this. And also in the style sheet, we can just comment out everything. So now let's style the div with a class registration page. So dot, we set the width to 100%, 100 VH. And we'll give it a gray background color. So now I can run this with the VS Code Live Server extension again. And boom, we have this background color on the page. Now I want to mention real quick that I still have the images folder with the images that I displayed from the beginning, which we'll be using in the tutorial, these icons over here. So if you still haven't got it, take a minute to download this from the internet, and let's go. So from here, we want to create another div inside the registration page and give it a class form container. And in this div, we'll have one IMG, which is the close icon. I will give it a class close icon. And after this, we'll link another image. So IMG again. And this is the X icon. So as usual, X icon. And the class will also be X icon. So now let's start this in the CSS. So now let's start the form container div. But before then, let's set the position for this, the registration page to position to absolute. And let's make the top 0. So now we can start the form container, which is inside the registration page. We set the width to 600 pixels, height to 90%. So now let's start the images inside the form container. We'll start with the close icon. Set the width to 35 pixels. We give it same height. So we set position absolute, top to 15 pixels, left 15 pixels, and set cursor to pointer. So now let's start the X icon. So inside the form container still. And now when we save this, you can see we have the form container over here, but we want it to be aligned in the center. So what we'll do is that before the margin top, we'll set margin auto, and that will take it to the center, and that's exactly what we have here. But look at the close icon. The close icon we have here should be somewhere here, but it's inside is positioned absolute to the parent div rather than the form container, and that is because over here we set position absolute for the close icon, but the parent is not having any positioning. So the position over here in the form container will be inherit. So we'll set it to relative position. So position, then it will be position relative to the parent. So now we have it here. And this is exactly what we want. But here it seems the close icon is way too large. So let's reduce it from 35 to 30 pixels. And this should look okay now. Okay. Now here in the HTML, after these images, we'll create a form. The action is not required, so we'll just set a hashtag thing here. And inside this form, we'll create an h1, and the text is sign in to X. And after this h1, we'll create a button and give it a class sign up Google. And inside this button, we'll first link an img, the Google icon. And after the img, we'll create a span, and the text is sign in with Google. So we can copy this button, the entirety of the button, and paste again and make some changes. So instead of Google, we change it to Apple. Apple, and this one, the image will be the Apple icon, and the odds should be Apple. And the text over here, instead of Google, it should be Apple. So let's give the CSS styling. So now we'll start with the form inside the form container. Now let's style the h1 inside the form. We'll only give it some margin. And now let's style the buttons. We'll set display flex. So this is the styling for the button. So the background color is transparent. We set cursor to pointer so that when we hover over it, it will indicate that it's clickable. So now let's start the image inside the button, the icons. The form is inside the form container div, and we have the button inside the form and images inside the button. So width, give them 20 pixels and some margin to the right, 10 pixels. So now when we save this, you can see we have this here, and when we hover over the buttons, we have this hand-like cursor indicating that it's clickable. So it's working the way we want it to. So now let's create this section where we have the or. If you look at it, you can see that we have one thin line over here, another thin line to the right, and the text is at the center of it. So let's add that in the HTML. So after the button, we'll create another div and give it a class alternative section. And inside, we'll create one span. And after that, with no text, we'll create a paragraph with the text or. And after this, we'll create another span with no text. So in the CSS, we'll select the alternative section. We'll set the width to 100%. So now let's style the span inside the alternative section div. We'll set width to 45%. This RGB color code. And when we save this code, You can see we have this over here and it's looking okay. So now we are left with this input field and these two buttons and also this text over here. After the alternative section closing div, we want to create an input with type text. Let's call it, the name should be personal. Let's give it an ID, personal as well. And let's give it a placeholder, this text over here. And after this, we have these two buttons. So let's create them. So after this, we'll create a button with the class next. Let's make it next btn. And the text is next. And we'll create another button with the class forget pass btn. And the text is forget password. It's a question. So now let's create this text over here. Already have account. So over here, after the closing form tag, we'll create a div and give it a class sign up. Inside this div, we'll create a span. And the text is don't have account with a space, an a tag, an anchor tag, and set the href to hashtag. And the text is sign up. There's a space between. Now you see we have this input here and the buttons. The buttons seem to have inherited the CSS styling for the previous ones and this one here. So let's add their unique stylings for them. So let's start with the input inside the form. Width is 100%. So this is the CSS for the input. You can see it's looking nice now. So we are left with just this one. So the class we give that div was sign up. So it's inside the form container. So margin top 25 pixels. Margin left to 25%. Now let's start the span inside the sign up. So now we can style the anchor tag inside. Font size will be 18 pixels. Text decoration will be none. And we'll give it some color. This RGB color code. Now when we save, you can see everything looks very good now. But we want to now add the hover effect for all the items over here. So let's start from where we just ended. This one, this sign up over here. You see that when we hover over it, it has the underlining. The text decoration comes. So we'll select this again. Paste it here. Colon hover. Text decoration should be underlined. Now you can see it's working. So now let's go to the sign in with Google button so that we can start from the top. So over here, after the images in the button, before the alternative section, we want to select the various buttons and give them the hover effect. You can see for the Google, we have this class for it. Sign up Google. So let's select that over here. Colon hover. We change the background color to this RGB color code. And now when we save this, you can see when we hover over it, we have the hover effect. But for the sign in with Apple, you'll see that we have the hover effect for it, but we also have the text is a little bit deep and a very bit larger than the usual one. So let's add that first. So over here, we'll select the sign up Apple. I will set the font size 17 pixels. Font width will be 600. And now you can see the font weight is increased. So now we can add the hover effect. So we'll select it again. Colon hover. We'll set the background color to this RGB color code. Remove this over here, this space over here. Now when we save and we head over, you can see that the background color is changing. We have these two of them working. So now let's add the stylings for the next button. You can see it has a background color that is black, and also the text is white, and some slight hover effect. You hardly will notice it. And it comes right after the input. So after the input, we'll select the next BTN, and it's inside the form container. So we'll give it the background color that is black. And when we save this, no, we have to spell the next variable. So now you can see we have the styling for it over here. So let's add the hover effect. So select the next BTN again. So when we hover, we'll take the background color. The background color will make it this RGB color code, which is technically black, but with some level of opacity, transparency rather. So when we save this, you can see now we have this slight change in the color whenever we hover over it. So now we are left with the forget password, which technically has the same color change as the sign in with Google. So we'll just apply this same distance styling to it. So after the next button, what we want to do is we want to select that button, which is forget pass BTN. That was the distance we gave to it. Colon hover. And we can copy this one, sign up Apple, and just put it here, because it's technically the same thing. And when we save this one, you could see we have the same distance over here. But one thing I forgot to mention is that if you look at the original distance, you'll see that this one also has a bolder font rather than just the normal one. So we'll select this one again without the hover. It's forgot, but I think I misspelled it. But since it's working, we don't have to worry. Set the font weight, should be 900, and font size should be 17 pixels. When we save, you can see that we have this over here. The hover effect is working for all of them, but it's quite too swift. So in the buttons, over here in the buttons, we'll set transition so that it works for all the buttons. Transition or 0.2 seconds, and it should ease in out. And when we save, you can see this now. It takes some small delay, but we are left with one, which is the close icon. When you look at the original design, when we hover over it, we have this background color change for it. Set the background color to this RGB color code, and we want some delay, so we'll set transition inside the close icon. So when we save, so now when we hover over the close icon, you can see the background color for it keeps changing. It changes. So the hover effect for all the buttons is working too. And that for this text is also working. So folks, this basically how we've come to the conclusion of building the sign-in page for the social media platform X through a step-by-step tutorial using HTML and CSS. If you find any value in this video so far, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more tutorials like this one. If you have any question, please do leave it in the comment section below. As always, thanks for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.